Hello and welcome to another timeless video, MTG Arena's most powerful and degenerate format, and it doesn't get much more degenerate than just winning the game on turn 1, and this deck can do so in a surprisingly consistent number of ways. So the real MVP here, the card that we're trying to get back into play as quickly as possible, is Hoarding Broodlord, an 8-mana 7/6 dragon with Convoke, has flying, and says when this creature enters we get to search our library for any card, exile it face down, and then for as long as that card remains exiled, we may play it, and spells we cast from exile also have Convoke, which is very convenient because we can now immediately tap our reanimated Broodlord for Convoke to cast more spells afterwards to keep chaining together more and more spells, our eventual win condition being Tendrils of Agony to just storm the opponent to death by draining them for 2 repeatedly. Now, how do we increase our storm count once we get a Broodlord in play, which we can set up as early as turn 1 in this deck? Often the culprit when it comes to fast combo decks is going to be Dark Ritual, 1 mana to generate triple black, and then we can use that 3 remaining mana to first set up an Entomb, searching our library for any card and put it into our graveyard, search up the Broodlord, put it in the graveyard, and then we have 2 different ways of bringing it back. Can either reanimate, paying a life equal to its mana value for 1 mana, or because we're going for a non-legendary creature, we also have access to Persist, which returns it to play with a -1/-1 counter. Then in addition to Entomb, we also have the added consistency of being able to run Unmarked Grave, because once again, we're not going for a legendary creature, so that's the upside of running the Broodlord over other reanimation targets that are typically more powerful, cards like Atraxa or Gristlebrand. There's a few others that come to mind. So once we have our Broodlord in play, we get to choose a card to put in exile, and that kind of depends based on what we have in hand. Let's say we already have a copy of Saw in Half, then the Broodlord can once again go for Dark Ritual, cast it using Convoke, tapping itself, making another 3 black mana, which is just enough to Saw in Half, targeting our own Broodlord. Now, Saw in Half is an interesting one, since it originally appeared in one of those joke sets where the cards aren't constructed legal, but they made an exception for a few cards that are still playable in constructed, Saw in Half being one of them. It ended up on the bonus sheet from the Spider-Man set, which ended up being Through the Omen Paths on Arena, and that's how we ended up with this version of Saw in Half in Timeless. Destroying target creature. If that creature dies this way, its controller creates 2 tokens that are copies of that creature, except their power is half that creature's power and their toughness is also half that creature's toughness, rounded up each time. Don't really care about the power and toughness, we simply care about generating 2 copies of the Broodlord, which will both also trigger their Enters a Battlefield ability, allowing us to search up 2 more cards, and that's where we usually go for at least 1 copy of Sacrifice, which as an additional cost to cast has to sacrifice a creature, generating an amount of black mana equal to the sacrificed creature's mana value. So Sacrifice can tap our Broodlord with Convoke, sacrifice it, generate 8 mana, and then with that 8 mana, we can maybe use it to persist the Broodlord back into play, since one's now in the graveyard after casting Saw in Half, which gets back a Broodlord once again, rinse and repeat, getting another Saw in Half, which in turn can get another Persist or maybe even Reanimate if we have the life to spare, and then we can get more copies of Sacrifice to keep making more mana, and then at some point, once we do that loop enough times, we can set up a Tendrils of Agony for the win. So that's our general game plan. Then we also have kind of a backup plan in case we don't draw all the combo pieces in our opening hand. We can maybe set up an early Necro, which can draw us additional cards. It does skip our draw step, we have to pay life to draw those cards, but often we'll just draw 7 or 8 cards at once, and then often we'll be able to combo on the following turn. We also have more fast mana thanks to Chrome Mox, which can imprint one of our many black cards, since we have a relatively low land count, so plenty of cards we can imprint, or perhaps we can evoke our Grief, which can also pitch a black card to evoke it for free, have a look at the opponent's hand, maybe take away some key interaction like a counter spell, and then Grief can also be used alongside Sacrifice to generate 4 black mana, so that can also maybe give us that initial mana we need to kickstart the combo, so that's also incredibly relevant. And then we've got a few one-offs, Demonic Tutor since it's restricted, so we can't play more than 1 copy, and then Thoughtseize as another discard spell we can play alongside Grief, and also potentially a 1-mana spell we can find with the Broodlord and then cast, tapping the Broodlord for Convoke. So that's pretty much the entire deck. So with a fast mana from Chromox, Dark Ritual, and sometimes even the Sacrifice alongside Grief, we've got a ton of ways to get ahead of mana early, which can then set up the combo in a variety of ways, either using Entomb, Unmarked Grave, followed by either Persist or Reanimate. And then 2 copies of Tendrils just for added redundancy in case something bad happens to the first one. Then the mana base runs a bunch of fetch lands, not because I necessarily want to grab Undercity Sewers to surveil all that badly, which of course is an upside of having these fetch lands, but mostly to play around opposing copies of Strip Mine, which is of course legal in the format. So if on turn 1 we're not ready to combo yet, we can simply play a fetch land, pass the turn, and then our opponent is unable to take out our land since we could just fetch in response, and then on the following turn, if we are ready to combo, we can fetch up some of our swamps, and then if they strip mine us, it's too late, we can still make mana in response and keep going off. So yeah, that's our deck. Now let's jump into some games and see how the deck does. Okay, we're on the play, facing a Lurrus deck. My hand is missing mana. We have all the pieces to put Broodlord in the graveyard. Broodlord in hand's not ideal, Tendrils in hand's also not necessary. So I think I still got a mulligan, sadly. This one is powerful, but also doesn't have any fast mana. Could still try it, just because we have some good discard. Can maybe try and leverage Necro as card advantage. So I'll keep it. Need to keep 2 lanes, so I guess I'll get rid of Tendrils for now. Have a look with Thoughtseize, and then I'll see if I need to Grief as well. Alright, it is energy. So, don't really care about Galvanic Discharge too much. So I guess Ragavan turn 1 can do the most damage. Don't feel the need to Grief. Could also reanimate Ragavan technically, but I'm probably going to hang on to it. And then Dark Ritual and Chromox would let me Necro. Otherwise we'll Surveil. And don't need another Necro. Alright. Against the energy deck, my life total is under a little bit of pressure, but I can afford to reanimate a Broodlord and draw a few cards of Necro at least. Alright, Ajani makes things a little more complicated, since that can give the energy deck a lot of reach with the Zero ability. They can always discharge their own creature as well. Sacrifice is useful. So I could technically evoke Grief and set up Sacrifice, but then, of course, I don't have a great way to spend all that mana. So I'm still going for Necro. And then I have to do a little bit of math to see how much I can afford to lose if I still want to reanimate, because reanimate is going to cost 8. So then another 4, 12. Yeah, it's not much. Could always Grief pitching Sacrifice just to make sure our opponent cannot transform a Ajani as easily. Or I can hope to draw a different reanimation spell like Persist, which doesn't cost me a bunch of life. That's also reasonable. And then for now, Grief, take the discharge. Yeah, I think that's worth it. See what else they have. Guide of Souls. If they go Guide of Souls plus Raptor, they can also get a bunch of energy. I guess Raptor by itself can set up the guide. But Discharge is a really scary card since it transforms a Ajani. And could also technically mess up my combo. Alright, so Necro can draw. So currently if I take 4... I can still afford to draw 1 more, but drawing 4 total may not be enough. So I think I'm just hoping to hit Persist. So then I can afford to go a little bit deeper. This gets 2 counters, so 3 plus 3, 6. Let's do 1 more. So I pretty much have to win next turn. Okay. Saw in half, ritual, tendrils. So I have to discard 2 cards. We found the persist. Dark ritual's great. Double sacrifice, maybe overkill. And grief plus sacrifice, I guess, can also give me more mana. So I just need to find the entomb. So I don't think I need another tendrils necessarily. And I can get rid of probably the grief here. Alright. Their opponent found an untapped lane, so they can curve Guide into Raptor. And then hopefully Raptor doesn't find... Goblin Bombardment would be the worst case scenario, I guess. They hit Swords to Plowshares, that's fine. They have 7 energy, so they can activate Guide twice. So that's 8 damage total. So we're at 1. And 1 is not 0. Okay, so step 1, Dark Ritual. Tutor for Entomb. Cast the Entomb. Broodlord and gets persisted back. So I'm gonna have to Chromox cast Sacrifice, and then I just want another persist. Because I cannot convoke the persist using Broodlord or cast Sacrifice with convoke. But now I can persist back Broodlord once again, and now we have the mana to saw in half. And then I just want to get another persist. And get another Sacrifice. And a saw in half. Sacrifice now with convoke. Persist with convoke. And could already go for tendrils. Storm count's high enough. But yeah, I could keep going if I wanted to. GG's. So yeah, we were at 1 life, so it was incredibly close. Alright, sweet. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw. Our hand has potential. Turn 1 Unmarked Grave, turn 2 Persists if all goes to plan. Best draw would be something like a Dark Ritual. Drawing a Reanimator or another Persist would help. Opponent on the Artifact deck, which isn't known for having a ton of interaction, but they could have Metallic Rebuke. For now, Interlacer. If they have a Mox Opal, it's already enabled. Chromox instead. The Artifact deck doesn't have a ton of cards to imprint necessarily, but we'll see. It's still a 0-mana artifact at the end of the day. Opponent does pitch Metallic Rebuke, so pretty happy with that exchange. And we found a Grief, which could be worth casting here with Evoke, pitching either Necro or Broodlord before I make a move. Yeah, I guess Broodlord can go for now. Opponent had Thought Monitor, Thought Cast. Well, Thought Monitor gets another 1 mana discount after Tamio attacks. So they're actually close to casting it, but there's a chance they won't be able to next turn, although it's not super realistic since most of their cards are either 0 mana artifacts or lands that are artifacts as well. So then I feel like they're gonna get to Thought Monitor me anyways. They both draw 2, it's not like I care about the 2/2 body too much. Alright, fine, I'll take the Thought cast. At least if they cast a Thought Monitor, they're more likely to be tapped out. And then pitch Necro, which I don't think I'll need. And then Unmarked Grave, Broodlord in the graveyard. So I guess there's no real risk of drawing into it anymore. Alright, so as long as I didn't draw another counterspell, next turn I get to Persist. Tamio's gonna plus. Well, drawing Sacrifice also helps. So get Broodlord back, that resolves. And then Dark Ritual is probably the way to go. With Convoke. Now I can saw in half. And we're off to the races. So one gets Sacrifice, one gets Persist. Could also go for another Dark Ritual. Options aplenty. Broodlord's back. Get another saw in half. And we're storming off. And get a Sacrifice. And now time for Persist. Next time I go through my library, I can maybe look at my storm count, just to double check that we don't have lethal already. Tendrils at 8, so we're very close. Let's get another saw in half. And get 2 more. Have another Persist. Could also reanimate at this point. We have plenty of life to spare. Persist Broodlords. Could even get a Thoughtseize here just to double check that their hand doesn't have any answers. But even if they had a Force of Negation, it wouldn't really help, because this is a Storm spell, so the copies would still resolve. But that's why we have the One of Thoughtseize, just to have it as an option for Broodlord. GG's. So yeah, turn 2 kill. This deck is scary consistent. Especially in best of 1, where you don't expect too many surgical extractions, which can otherwise ruin your day. And there we go, on to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw. This is possibly a turn 1 win, if there's no interaction. A mountain I don't mind seeing, and a Bolt Wave. Alright. Ritual into Ritual, Entomb, and hope there's no surgical extractions. Persist, and with Convoke I can cast Saw in half. And we're off to the races. Get another Persists, and get Sacrifice. Have enough life where I could also reanimate instead of Persist, but usually the default is to go for Persist since we have plenty of mana to spare. Get back the Broodlord. Get another Saw in half. Yeah, for a combo deck, this one's not too complicated to kind of go through the motions. Goes by pretty quickly. And there's some built-in redundancy to help out against potential misclicks as well, since we usually have some mana spare. Get back Broodlords. Get Saw in half. What's my storm count at? Alright, we have enough. Yeah, Bolt Wave doesn't always work out in Timeless compared to what some of these combo decks are capable of. But I guess some Reanimator decks do pay a lot of life to their fetch lands, shock lands, and reanimates. So then you can sometimes steal a game with just 6 or 9 points of burn. But not this time. Okay, we're on the draw. This hand doesn't really do much of anything. This one could go off pretty quickly. Entomb Persist, have a ritual. Second Entomb probably has to go, because if they have a discard spell, they would probably go after the Persist here, or the Dark Ritual. Could also Dark Ritual Necro on turn 1. So we've got a few options. Let's see what our opponent's up to. Watery Grave, Tamio. So likely a Force of Negation deck, which, yeah, does complicate matters. They could also have their own reanimate, so then Entombing is dangerous if they can counter the Persist. Going Ritual into Necro also uses up a lot of resources, to be fair. But I think I actually prefer it. They might also counter the Ritual, but kind of doubt it. Alright, what do you have? That resolves. So, yeah, can activate quite a bit. I don't have to absolutely combo next turn, so I could take it a little slow, just hit my land drop next turn, and then maybe try and combo the turn after. If they have Orcish Bowmasters, Necro puts the card in hand and doesn't technically draw, so that plays around it. So I could just draw 3, have a full grip, and then maybe next turn reevaluate how many cards I want to draw. This way I don't have to discard to hand size. Alright, drew the Broodlords. Tamio attacks. Grief is very useful to check for counter spells. Strip Mine's gonna hit my land. Okay. And a Brainstorm. So yeah, I'm gonna have to hit a few more mana cards with Necro before I can truly combo. But I'm fine griefing just to make sure I use up some of the cards in hand, because I'm gonna have to discard to hand size otherwise. Tamio transforms, that's fine. So it's possible they hit some counter spells with Brainstorm, but their free counter spells are probably still in hand. So take my turn. Don't have to fetch with Bloodstained Mire to play around another Strip Mine. So Grief, pitching probably the Broodlord, and then hope that the second copy doesn't get exiled somehow. Can't Force of Negation the Grief. Maybe they have a Subtlety. Yep. Pitching the Architect. So I can put it back on top. Play my fetch. Activate Necro. I'm drawing at least 3. Probably more, since I want to make sure I hit a land drop or some fast mana. 4. Let's make it 5. And then pass. I can either Entomb at instant speed, end of turn, or I can get a Surveil land. Have a few options. Have double Grief. So what am I not gonna need? Unmarked Grave can go since we have double Entomb. And do I need a second Entomb is a question. Do I need to double Grief? Maybe. Although that's a lot of cards going out of my hand, so then I may not have enough to combo. So yeah, Entomb end of turn. Grief pitching, let's say, another Entomb. I don't think our opponent's likely to counter my end of turn Entomb, so let's get rid of it. Time your pluses. Opponent fetches. And a Psychic Frog's fine. 2 cards in hand, so at most Force of Negation to worry about. Broodlord in graveyard. I guess there could still be Surgical Extraction, technically. But yeah, let's start with Grief. I guess I can let the Grief trigger resolve, check out their hand while it's still in play. I can sacrifice, that also works. So yeah, just making sure I have a look before we sacrifice. So I'm going in full control just to make sure. Opponent had a subtlety, that doesn't matter here. Alright, so I can just sacrifice now. Make 4 mana. So there's no need to Grief a second time, but I might have been able to. Persist back my Broodlord. Can now go for Dark Ritual. Just to give me a little bit of extra mana. Then we can saw in half. And we're off to the races. So yeah, even the free counter spells are beatable if you have Grief available. Get Persist and get Sacrifice. Make a bunch more mana. But yeah, if this deck somehow catches on, I think the main threats, especially in best of 1, would be Surgical Extraction, since that one's pretty tricky to interact with, especially if you go for your Entomb end of turn, expecting to be able to combo. So is my storm count high enough already? I feel like it is. Opponent's gonna pass priority. Can exile cards from their graveyard, sure. I guess that's another way of passing priority, so the Psychic Frog doesn't constantly hold up the game. Can appreciate it. Alright, storm count is high enough. Could even double tendrils them. And there we go. Sweet, on to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw, facing a Lurrus variant. My hand has Unmarked Grave, but no way to reanimate. No fast mana, no card draw. This is a mulligan. Alright, Entomb into Persists with Chromox. That's a keep. Broodlord can go. And our opponent on energy. So, don't need to Chromox yet, since it could be vulnerable to their removal, Static Prison. And we can Entomb at instant speed, so yeah, just pass a turn. This also plays around Strip Mine. And then can we win if we persist a dragon next turn? Still not a guarantee. So I could take it slow since we're not under a ton of pressure. And then just Entomb the dragon still, but then turn to Demonic Tutor to maybe get Saw in half. Yeah, that seems reasonable. Could also try and get a discard spell in there to play around Swords to Plowshares, which could also possibly interfere. Well, Grief helps. Could still Grief next turn, and then for now tutor for Saw in half, And then next turn I get to Grief and Persist, which should hopefully be enough. Could also go for Dark Ritual and then get Saw in half with a Broodlord. I think I prefer having Saw in half in hand. Pass a turn. Just giving them the extra draw step so they can maybe draw into Swords to Plowshares if they didn't have one already. And Janny's fine. If they have 2 Swords to Plowshares, then of course we'll have to readjust. But let's start here. I guess Untomb better than an unmarked grave at this point. Opponent had the swords, just cast it on the Grief, that's fine. And another Janny, Deathrite, Peddler, so nothing that matters. Alright, let's go ahead and persist. Broodlords. Get Dark Ritual. Cast with Convoke. Now I want to get Persist and Sacrifice. Make some mana. And get back my dragon. Start increasing our storm counts. Get another Saw in half. The fun thing about playing kind of an unknown combo deck is that people are more likely to stick around since they don't exactly know what's happening yet. But yeah, they are very much dead. So I gotta persist, I can go for another sacrifice. Get Saw in half. Although I guess my storm count's already high enough here. Can just end the game. Yeah, the energy matchup is pretty good since they have very little in the way of interaction outside of maybe Swords to Plowshares. So as long as you can combo around turn 2 or turn 3, you should be golden. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw, and we have turn 1 Ritual, Entomb, Persist. Doesn't get much better. Opponent on Eldrazi. So can I win here? Ritual takes care of Entomb, Persist. I have a Chromox for 1 more mana, but I can't quite Saw in half yet. Either way, I can Grief just to make sure our opponent doesn't have any relevant interaction. Could also turn 1 Necro. So let's start here. Alright, Chalice could possibly affect us, so that's probably what I'll take. And then nothing else that worries me at the moment, but they could still draw into a Coast LLC command, I suppose, which is a reason to put my dragon into play. This is 4 mana to play Kicked to bounce a creature, so that does not really mess with my dragon. Alright, so then, yep, let's go for Ritual, Entomb, Persist. That way I play around Coast LLC command top deck. Get Saw in half, and then next turn I should be able to cast it with a Chromox. And then we can keep comboing. But yeah, right now I'm a mana short because I can pitch Necro, Convoke, but that's still only 2 mana. But since they played Courtyard on turn 1, there's no real danger of Eldrazi Temple enabling them to bounce with a Battle Mage. And now if they top-decked Coast LLC command, it's not as much of a disaster. Opponent didn't play anything, so it's possible they still drew something here. I can start by attacking for 6, I guess. Since I drew the land, so I can still convoke here. So let's say I saw and have Broodlords. Yeah, that's still probably a fine starting point. And then we'll see if we can keep comboing or if they did draw Coast LLC commands. Does not seem like they're holding priority. So in that case, get Sacrifice, get Persist. And then I can technically persist first. So I don't sacrifice any of my dragons yet, that resolves. Get Saw in half. And yeah, we're off to the races. And yeah, our opponent scoops it up. I could probably already go for a Tendrils here. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw. This is possibly a turn 3 win. Unless I draw a Ritual or a Chromox, then it could speed up. Because we can unmark Grave and then turn 3 reanimate. Get Dark Ritual, cast Saw in half. Opponent on maybe an aggro deck. Another Saw in half is a bit redundant. Can also Surveil end of turn, maybe draw into a Dark Ritual that way. Take a Chromox as well. A red-white. And a voice. Okay, that's fine. So we get to Surveil. And Marsh Flats isn't really necessary, doesn't speed up the kill. So I'd rather draw Ritual or Chromox. Tendrils is not quite it. Alright, so I get to unmark Grave Broodlords and then, yeah, hope to combo next turn. Still a chance they have like a Swords to Plowshares to interfere. Did not draw any of my discard spells. Still have 8 life I can pay. Their opponent does have 2 mountains, so if they go double bolt plus fire blast, I guess I'm dead. But I don't have a choice, I have to go for it. I guess double bolt would already be enough. So I have to get Dark Ritual here. Or Sacrifice. No, Sacrifice doesn't do it. So Dark Ritual it is. With Convoke. Hope this works. Alright, so far so good. Get Persist and Sacrifice. And since we have a Tendrils in hand already, at the very least I can gain a bunch of life back. But if they didn't respond so far, I don't think they have anything. Persist back the Broodlord. So let's see. Now we need to go for another Saw in half, although I have one in hand. Still fine to go for it, I guess, or I can get a Dark Ritual as well. Persist Sacrifice. And then next time I can maybe get a Tendrils, we'll see. Keep the slightly larger Broodlord in play. Probably don't need to tap to Convoke anymore. And get Tendrils. Could also get a Thoughtseize, but then I'm afraid I'm gonna get burnt out, so let's just play it safe. Just tendrils first. I guess could also go for a Grief at some point and just hardcast it. But I can't think of too much that can go wrong. Even if the Lightning Helix gained some life, I just cast a second tendrils. And our opponent scoops it up. I'll take it. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw with a possible turn 2 kill. Turn 1 Unmarked Grave, turn 2 Persist, get Dark Ritual, Saw in half. Opponent's off to a quick start as well. Pitching Reanimate, so we have to be careful that our opponent doesn't reanimate our Broodlord, which is always possible. Show and Tell. Well, that could be game over depending on their last 2 cards. I'll just put the land in play, I guess. Saint Alanda. Still beatable, strangely enough. And a Cleric, so they get to make a large token. Sure, so that's their turn 1. Now, Show and Tell did not speed up my combo significantly. Just gotta hope their last card in hand isn't another reanimation spell. Although I guess we have a second Unmarked Grave, so we can maybe try again. But I probably would be too far behind on life. Oh, opponent's hovering over my graveyard. Alright, let's go for it. So I'm gonna persist here. Get back Broodlord. That resolves. Get Dark Ritual. Cast it. And Saw in half. So far so good. Now we can get Sacrifice and another Persists. Yeah, when we can beat another powerful Reanimator start while being on the draw as well. It kind of shows the upside of the Broodlord build over other Reanimator variants. Storm count's already pretty high, but our opponent's at 26, so we might have to go through the motions for a little bit longer. Casting a small tendrils would also allow me to reanimate now, instead of just using Persist. So there's a lot of wiggle room for potentially comboing multiple times in one turn. Or if the opponent gained a lot of life, we can still figure out a win. So is double tendrils lethal yet? Opponent could technically have some counter spells as well. Worst case scenario would be something like a green source into Veil of Summer, which would protect him from a tendrils. I don't think I can really play around that too much. I guess I can get a discard spell first. So I can maybe still try that. Just to make sure I don't spew my tendrils. Alright, so let's get a Grief. And then another Persist. Cast a Grief normally. There was another Saint Alanda. Could get in on the fun, but I guess Persist only reanimates my own creatures. So I would have to tendrils first and then reanimate Saint Alanda afterwards. but we don't need to touch those alchemy cards. And then double tendrils should be more than enough. Suppose I could have also increased my storm count by 1, so a single tendrils would have been lethal. But I'm sure they'll concede as soon as I show them the second copy without going through the motions. So yeah, I've been incredibly impressed by this Broodlord build of Reanimator. Doesn't leave anything to chance. Once you reanimate the Broodlord, you're usually in a spot where you can win the game right away, unlike cards like Atraxa or Gristlebrains, which might be able to draw into a ton of interaction, which is great, but sometimes it's nice to be able to win the game on the spot. Having both Persist and Unmarked Grave for added redundancy, since we're not going for a legendary creature as our reanimation target, also helps with the consistency of the deck. So yeah, have a lot of great things to say about it, and I recommend giving it a try if you're looking to jump into Timeless with a Reanimator deck. But for now, I want to thank you for watching, hope you enjoyed, and as always, have a nice day.